Okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of, let me adjust here, of Torrent Book Club. I am your host, Sarumann, also known as Josh, and we have a big show today, all about the fall of Númenor. As we continue our Silmarillion series, we are in our penultimate episode, our second to last episode. And this is very exciting. We're almost at the end. Yes, I Stole the One Ring is saying if Sauron had an intro theme, we just found it. This is before we began recording this, we played a little of the Mordor theme from Lord of the Rings to sort of get us all in the mood for hearing about one of Sauron's greatest and most terrible achievements. This is what we're about to get into here is one of the most catastrophic things Tolkien has ever written. And I was joined yesterday by our very own Quickbeam, also known as Cliff Broadway. He joined me to talk about this at the annual screening of the Lord of the Rings extended trilogy that happens every year at the Arrow Theater. It was a very lively conversation. Cliff has been wanting to be on this show and talk about the intricacies of Tolkien for quite a long time, but our schedules have never really meshed up because he works a lot and he's working every Sunday, so it's been very hard for us to get together to actually do a show. But I had my computer with me, we set up the webcam and just started talking. And we have about a 50-minute conversation about this. So everybody's saying hi in the chat room. Hello, everybody. Hello to Ava, Eruvandi, I Stole the One Ring, Temple, Suzanne, everybody. Okay, that's not working. All right, we'll do this. Temple saying it would be awesome if he could make it sometime. Yeah, I would love for him to be on the show live sometime, but in lieu of that, we have a good pre-recorded conversation, and hopefully we can do it again. So, without further ado, I will go to the big board just to help refresh us a little bit on where we left off last week. Last week we were dealing with the last king of Númenor. His name was Ar-Pharazôn, and he has been feeling threatened by the presence of Sauron over in Middle-earth. And so he has sent a huge army to Middle-earth to capture Sauron, and unbeknownst to him, or unexpected by him, Sauron surrendered himself without a fight. And so now Ar-Pharazôn has taken Sauron prisoner and brought him back to Númenor. And that's when stuff really starts to go down. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to get into it too much here. I'm going to let the video of me and Cliff from yesterday do a lot of the explanation, and then I'll be back after that to sort of clarify points or talk about stuff that we might have skipped over. Because one of the things you'll see about a conversation with Cliff is that it can go off in wild directions, and yeah. So I will turn it over to me and Cliff. I'll be here monitoring the chat to see your questions, and I'll also be popping up illustrations that mirror what we're talking about. So I will see you in about 50 minutes or so to answer questions and clarify stuff. So take it away, me and Cliff.
pronounced Untitled.
Oh,
Okay, we got some Council of Elrond going on there.
Gimli is fighting with Legolas in there now.
Yep.
So it's very interesting. The spirit of Sauron makes itself so manifest.
Yeah. Okay, we're recording now. So, we are here at the Arrow Theater in Santa Monica, California, where they are showing the entire Lord of the Rings extended trilogy, and Fellowship is playing right now, and I'm here joined by Clifford Broadway, also known as Quickbeam, and it's great to finally have you on the show.
It's so great that finally.
Yes.
I've never had a very important. There's loud battles happening in Fellowship of the Ring behind that door.
Yeah.
So from time to time you might hear
a crash or something.
or the familiar strains of Howard Shore's wonderful music.
Yes.
But hello, Josh. I've not had a very forgiving work schedule.
I know. It's been really hard for us to coordinate, but we finally are here in one place. I've got the ability to record something, so we're like, okay, let's do this.
So this is a nice little addendum that will be shown live.
Yeah, so this will be on the show.
This is exciting.
So
the best parts of the Silmarillion for many people come at the end of the book.
Absolutely.
Because it ties in threads that they're so much more familiar with in the Third Age and things related to the War of the Ring.
Yeah.
Do you find that to be the case a lot?
Absolutely.
People can't warm up to the Silmarillion at the beginning. By the end of it, they're just like, ooh, this is so good.
Well, you see, what I like so much about that, and especially in the second half of the Eye of Death, is that we do have references, or we start meeting characters who show up in the Lord of the Rings.
And are part of the world's political stage.
Yeah, like we have Elendil, he plays a big part in this.
Yes.
His son, Isildur, has a humongous part in this.
Yes, indeed. So now we're talking about the second half of the Eye of Death.
And so
I've never heard a better pronunciation for it. I'm not sure what the Númenor dialect is supposed to sound like.
Well, I've got the audiobook for the Silmarillion, and the narrator does a really good job of pronunciation, and he does pronounce it Untitled. Okay, we got some Council of Elrond going on there.
Gimli is fighting with Legolas in there now.
Yep.
So it's very interesting. The spirit of Sauron makes itself so manifest in that scene. Anyways, speaking of the spirit of Sauron, it certainly is, what we're talking about now.
It's manifest deeply in this part of the story.
Farazon has probably gone down in all of the histories of Tolkien stories as being the one guy who got most severely duped.
Seriously.
Duped.
Well, he got duped really hard, but one of the things that I found so incredibly telling about him was at one point during the hardship that Nmenor brings on the earth, he describes our Farazon as a tyrant that has not been seen in the world since the time of Morgoth.
Wow.
That is a huge indictment.
It is. Professor Tolkien found a way to bring these elements of biblical themes that are part of his metaphysical belief system, his Catholic belief system. And he also brought in pieces of other world legends like Atlantis that are not related to his Christian belief system.
No, not really, but
it's a fascinating mix
of
storytelling.
It's kind of funny to see shades of that show up in Tolkien, the fact that one of the Numenorians' terms for the lost land of Numenor is Atalanta.
Atalante, yes, which I wrote about in an old article on theoneroom.net about 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah, we were just looking through that. Very insightful stuff.
I'm telling you, there was another fellow who wrote an old article on the
Is that article still on the Torn Archives?
It still exists.
Okay, good. I'm gonna post a link to it on our Facebook.
And if you can't find it by that link, you can do a general Google search for theoneroom.net and then search for the word green books. Green books, all one word.
Green books, that's vintage Torn right there.
We had a geologist, a scientist, who wrote a huge article. It's called The Science of Middle-earth, where he explains the cataclysm of the destruction of Númenor in scientific terms.
Oh, interesting.
Tsunami, earthquake movements, plate tectonics. It's a fascinating piece. We've got a lot of good stuff on the old archives from the book.
Yeah, there's some great stuff in the green books, and also a lot of that was brought into the two books that we put out. Middle-earth. Oh, they just announced the Fellowship of the Ring.
And that got a standing ovation from the audience.
I got applause. Of course it did.
It's fantastic. Now, Sauron had proven himself to be much more like Loki. If you want to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's these moments in Lord of the Rings where no one recognizes what Sauron is. No one can identify this abstraction of evil floating in the distance like an eyeball. But in the Calabeth, especially in the second half, and the end chapter, Sauron was very, very much like Loki.
Yeah.
Lying, changing his form,
lying,
duping people,
and talking like very. He lies through flattery. Like he is flattering Ar-Pharazôn this entire time, calling him the King of Kings, and calling him all these other like just saying like he's second only to Manwë, and even if that.
It's amazing how Luciferian Tolkien portrays Sauron in a very biblical sense as that Lucifer who is there to provide temptations to every powerful figure on the page.
He's got some great temptations that he lays out for Ar-Pharazôn. There are other world outside of Nmenor that haven't been touched by man yet, and they have great riches, and they're yours for the taking. And then even beyond that, there's the darkness, where there's an infinite amount of things that can be created. And if you only worship the Dark Lord Melkor, who rules the darkness, he will create new rules for you, and your will will be unending.
What we learn is that Sauron tries to convince, and does, he succeeds in convincing Ar-Pharazôn to change the religion of Númenor.
Right,
and that's
a huge deal.
This is very, and instead of worshiping Eru, the one, whom the elves also called Númenor, Sauron convinced Ar-Pharazôn that Eru was not real.
Yeah,
that Valar had made an excuse for all their decrees.
Yeah, he basically said that the Valar are lying to you. Eru is a made-up thing.
Yeah, to make an excuse for what they're decrying.
Right.
Or decreeing,
Excuse
me. So, do you find it fascinating, this Lucifer and Loki analogy?
Absolutely. And like, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but he also does that again with the creation of the Rings of Power,
which we'll get to on another future Torn book club, which will be the final part.
That's the final chapter of the Silmarillion.
We're almost there. We're almost there, boys and girls. So I am deeply fascinated by those moments when Professor Tolkien inserts his personal metaphysical belief system into a secondary world, which has nothing to do with Christianity.
And that was like something that I found very fascinating, especially in the Calabeth, because it's like you can see lots of biblical ties in this, like with Elendil and the ships of the faithful.
Yes.
It ties very closely to Noah's Ark. Like find the faithful, get them into these ships, and be ready for the coming cataclysm.
Now, is it true, from my recollection, that the faithful became a segregated population in the island of Nmenor?
Very much so.
Okay, yes. And did they live on the eastern face of the island? So they could actually see in the distance the light of Nmenor.
Originally, they lived on the western side of Nmenor.
Excuse me, the western side.
Their original city was Untitled.
Yes.
Which faced Amon, and the only way you could ever really see it is if you climbed up right to the top of Meneltarma.
Yes,
the top peak, and only those who were very far-seeing would be able to see the city of Avalon, which is on the Lonely Isle. So they couldn't really see Amon, but they could see something.
Yes.
But only if you're like really, really looking.
Really? That's fascinating.
But they lived in a city that faced Amon. But at one point, and it wasn't Ar-Pharazôn who did this, it was a previous king, and I can't remember which one. It was in last week's episode, and the name escapes me because we went over so many kings.
But you covered the name, the nomenclature change.
Yes.
They changed the way they named themselves.
Right.
That's a fascinating insertion of power structure using linguistics, using the language as a supposed form of power. That was what Tolkien was all about.
And it was the schism between the Kingsmen and the Elf Friends.
Indeed.
That began this, and it was many generations later, and God, I want to say it was.
That big hero shot of the Fellowship is now walking up.
There it is. There it is.
We know this movie by heart.
We don't even need to see it to know what's going on.
So,
After that schism, and the rift, of course, deepens over many, many years.
yes.
To the point where one of the kings decrees that all of the Elrond in Untitled need to be removed and brought to Nmenor, which is the eastern sea.
Yes. That's
So
right.
they're all set up in Nmenor by the time of all Pharaohs.
Which was convenient because that's where they were going to leave.
Yeah.
At the time.
Mm-hmm.
The faithful,
Yes.
who were led by Elendil,
Amandil.
who was the father of.
He's the father of Elendil.
Thank you for getting the chronology straight.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is fantastic. I love this man. Great essence of knowing your details.
It's only because I've read this chapter about 10 times this week.
Brilliant. They needed to be geographically located, and it ended up being a benefit for them. They were beneficiaries of being forced in the migration to the outside of Nmenor.
They
had time to build the ships.
Yeah, they had time to build the ships. They had time to load the ships. They had time to really get themselves ready, even though they weren't entirely sure what was going to happen. They only knew that this was leading to something bad.
Yes.
And
very bad.
And Amandil actually does a very heroic thing. He tells his son Elendil and Elendil's two sons, Isildur and Anarion.
Isildur and Anarion, who are the actual statues of
the Argonath. Yes.
Just in case you're thinking the movie had the statues correct, they were not. They were not correct. But anyways, they're beautiful. But
Amandil tells his sons, take these ships and start loading them up quietly and very deliberately. Over time, start loading it up so that you don't raise suspicion. And what I'm going to do is
it's like the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
Trying to make a secret escape plan.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
And then what Amandil says is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a ship. I'm going to leave the eastern port of Nmenor. I'm going to sail out, and then I'm going to double back and go to Valinor and warn the Valar what's happening, which is in direct violation of the ban of Númenor.
Yes, that's right.
And he accepts that, and he says, the book is in my bag, which is right behind us.
Yes.
He basically says, I will take the punishment of breaking the ban on myself if it means saving the rest of you. Is essentially what he said.
This is fantastic. And when his ships approach, at that point in time, the Valar decide to completely throw their hands up in the air and resign themselves from the guardianship of this entire planet.
Yeah.
Faced with this crisis.
Yes.
Which is a line that absolutely never gets crossed. In Tolkien's world, this is an absolute metaphysical line that becomes a real physical, distinct thing that is never.
I don't know if it's explained more in the history of Middle Earth, because in the text of the Silmarillion, he basically says once Amandil leaves, they never hear from him again. They don't know if he made it to Valinor. They don't know if he was able to convince the Valar of anything.
We don't know.
Right. So he goes, and that's when the Valar, shortly after the Valar begin an assault on Númenor through the clouds, these beautiful eagle-shaped clouds.
Yes.
And they're shooting lightning down, and they break up the temple that Sauron has built to Melkor. And
where humans have been sacrificed.
Where humans are being sacrificed.
Yeah. Slight analogy to the downfall of the Aztec.
Empire. Very much so.
Don't you think?
Part of me, and I explained this last week, is I don't like to put words in Tolkien's mouth if I don't have anything from him directly saying that this was my inspiration for this, and only to say, well, that's obviously linked to this, or that's obviously inspired by this. It could be inspired by that, but I kind of don't want to cross that line of going from speculation to maybe it was inspired by this to it was definitely this.
Loose connections can be made. I love the sound system here.
Yeah, they are blowing it out.
A loose reference can be made to other historical great empires or civilizations that became so morally bankrupt
And
that he would sacrifice
and I mean,
part and parcel of
and
their
Tolkien was a
lives.
very learned scholar, so I'm sure he knew about Aztec history and Mayan history, and I'm sure that played some kind of role in it. What I find like so interesting about the downfall of Nmenor is just how far the path of good the Numenorians actually go. Like they go full on like hardcore evil. Like they're enslaving people, they're sacrificing people, they're killing each other, they create a witch hunt against the faithful. They're creating false accusations against the faithful so they can bring them in and sacrifice them. And then on top of all that, our Pharazôn is devising a way to attack Valinor.
Imagine trying a mortal man, even though he is one of the Numenorians.
Yeah.
Blessed with a great stature and long life.
Yeah. And this is towards the end of his life, and he's feeling and his mind.
So, right. Yeah. So again, these metaphysical arguments fuel the plot. This is fascinating to me.
And
but what's is that imagine not going to work out.
No.
How far do we go before our Pharazôn takes his fleet and goes to attack Nmenor? How far do we go to get to that point? It's only within a few years, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it takes 3 years for Sauron to endear himself into the councils of our Pharazôn.
Yes.
And to transform himself from prisoner to high priest.
Even in the Third Age, when we meet the mouth of Sauron, there's a suggestion that he may have been a black Nmenor.
Yeah.
One of those evil guys.
Well, and Tolkien even suggests in the Akallabeth that 3 of the 9 Nazgûl were Númenorians.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. That's fascinating too.
And that was actually something I meant to bring up last week because that's part of that first section of the Akallabeth. And it's just one line, it's just one sentence, but it's just like it really stuck out to me.
And it seems to fit too.
Yeah.
It's what a great source to get an evil or man who can be easily corrupted.
Yeah.
From the bad memories.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it's like the way he frames it is it's speculation because of who the 9 kings were who became the Nazgûl. They're lost to history, so nobody really knows who they were specifically.
Yes.
But he said, I believe the way he frames it is it's believed among the wise that 3 of them were Númenorians.
Yes. Yes. So, Tar Palantir.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about him last week.
You did? You got him?
Yeah, I got to Tar Palantir, and he's a cool character.
And the last time he was the uncle of our Pharazôn.
Yes.
Notice the suggestion of the pharaoh, the name.
Our Pharazôn, like, it immediately made me think of Pharaoh.
Our evil pharaoh. It's fascinating. So.
And Tar Palantir makes the big prophecy about the tree of Nmenor.
Yes.
And how the life of Nmenor is tied to the life of the Númenorians.
Indeed.
But
the seeds of Nmenor were carried.
Yes. And we should talk about that because that's Isildur's big moment.
It is. That's Isildur's big moment. And this is also noted in the Akallabeth.
Yeah. It's Sauron is being very methodical in sort of pushing our Pharazôn. He doesn't give him everything all at once.
It takes a number of years.
He like pushes him just a little bit at a time. And one of the things he tells him is, at some point you should chop down Nmenor, the tree from Valinor. And this one, our Pharazôn actually does resist because he believes in the prophecy. He believes what Tar Palantir said about the life of Nmenor being tied to the life of Númenor to be a real thing. So he doesn't want to do that. But at the same time, Amandil hears about this and knows that it's just a matter of time before our Pharazôn caves to that and does chop it down. And so he basically retells the story of Nmenor to his sons and his grandsons, Elendil, Isildur, and Anarion.
Must have been very young.
Yeah, they were very young. And Isildur takes it upon himself to sneak into the place where they're holding Nmenor and to steal fruit from it. And he's able to do this. Like, he goes in disguise, and like part of me is just sort of like picturing Isildur as like a ninja. Like,
cool.
Because he sneaks past the guards in disguise, steals a fruit from Nmenor, but he doesn't make it out. He gets attacked and he gets wounded very grievously.
Really?
And he's finally able to escape, but he's like mortally wounded. Gets back to Amandil, hands him the fruit, and then just basically drops into a coma. Like, he's severely injured.
Well, tonight's episode of The Adventures of Young Isildur.
Oh, it gets even better than that, because Amandil takes the fruit that Isildur had stolen, plants it, and when it finally sprouts, Isildur's wounds are magically healed, and he recovers completely.
That's fascinating. So the spiritual connections.
The connection is real.
Between the tree. Yes. This is fascinating. Is Nmenor related to one of the two trees?
It is.
Yes,
It
that's
is.
why.
I believe it's like a second generation seedling from Telperion.
That's right.
Because
That explains
they took a seedling from Telperion and brought it to Tol Eressëa.
Yes.
And then one of the gifts that the
All I
elves...
ever say on the movie line.
Yes. And one of the gifts that the elves gave to Númenor in the beginning was a seedling from that tree, which became Nmenor.
Indeed. Okay, I got the connection. That's excellent. So, ultimately, we get to the point of what Tolkien refers to as the last armament, or the great armament.
Yes.
And the Númenorians tried to invade it.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly what we're talking about. Yes. Perfect. I know what to ask.
All right.
We have some really, really great Tolkien fans.
Oh yeah. It was so funny. We were like actually going over like some trivia because Cliff had brought all these trivia cards, and we were reading one of them, and we were like neither of us knew the answer to this. Like, what were the color of Faramir's eyes? And we're like, well, what is that? And some girl just walked by and said gray. And we're like, oh my god.
A bystander who just overheard us. Great. She walked by and giggled.
We're like, that was freaking epic. That was so metal.
That was very metal. So, no. Do you know what else I found interesting? With my Twitter account, establishing myself as talking about Tolkien and his works all the time, I've had a lot of heavy metal musicians and death metal musicians following my Twitter feed.
It's not surprising.
To get Tolkien details. And they're all completely captivated by how metal Tolkien is.
Oh, yeah.
I just can't believe it.
Well, I wouldn't say that Tolkien was metal. I would say a lot of metal was taken from Tolkien.
They adopted Tolkien.
It's kind of a chicken or the egg sort of thing.
Yes. Professor Tolkien would never have thought his works were metal.
No, not at all.
But
I doubt he'd have been okay with any folk singers adapting his stuff the way they did.
Much doubt that. But it must be said that of all the things in the Silmarillion that really are very metal, the account of Númenor, his downfall, is incredibly metal. It's
unbelievably epic. It's like the greatest.
And it's ugly. It's a bit of ugly business. It really is.
It's really ugly. It's ugly. It's brutal, and it's utterly devastating. I don't think there's anything that Tolkien wrote before or since that had that level of destruction.
Speaking of, the destruction that we get to at the end of the downfall of Nmenor
is insane.
Let's go over the details so you guys know exactly, because this is going to be, like all of the ongoing series that Josh has provided on the Torn Book Club, an excellent reader's guide as you work your way through the Silmarillion.
I don't know about excellent, but
it is excellent, sir. You should be commended.
Okay, thanks.
The Great Armament.
Yes.
Built by Eye of Sauron. At this point, have the faithful left the
The faithful are in their ships. They might be. I don't believe they've actually left the island. No, they haven't left the island because
it's taken some time for Eye of Sauron to get
because Tolkien does talk about Elendil had to avoid Sauron's troops because they were trying to arrest him and take him to sacrifice right before they left. So they stick it out almost to the end.
Okay, fascinating. And by the time the fleet of Farazon arrive near the shores of Aman, then, as they say, all the S-H-I-T goes down.
Yeah,
it
like
goes down
all hell breaks loose. And it's not even the Valar who do it. Like, they call down the wrath of the Ilúvatar.
How did this metaphysically look? Imagine that Manwë and Yavanna and Ulmo and everybody on the whole team with the Valar. Do you think they spiritually transported themselves away from Valinor and said, "We're done"? They must have laid down their talismans, laid down their scepters and their eagles and their keys and their plants, and laid everything down and said, "We quit guardianship of this planet." And I'm wondering what this physically looked like.
I believe that the way I would interpret it was more of them just like not actually physically leaving, with them just like throwing up their hands in exasperation, saying, "That's it, we're done." Like,
Quitting out to Ilúvatar?
yeah, and because then Ilúvatar comes down and basically he literally opens up the earth.
And opens up the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
It becomes a true biblical cataclysm.
Yeah.
Real cataclysm. With what we know, the Great Armament was destroyed there on the shores.
Actually, Ar-Pharazôn and a few people actually make it off the ships and onto Amon.
Onto the soils.
Yes.
So they do break that ultimate barrier.
They break the ban. Like Ar-Pharazôn actually does land on Valinor, on Amon, and he actually he gets to shore and he sees the giant mountain Taniquetil.
Yes. Taniquetil. Yes, that's right.
He sees that and he's humbled and amazed by it. But it doesn't really matter too much because at that point, Ilúvatar opens up the earth, creates a giant chasm in the ocean, which swallows up the fleet. And I believe the way Tolkien describes it is Ar-Pharazôn and the people he was with a handful of soldiers who made it onto Amon. They were buried by a landslide. But
what a way to go.
But he doesn't say they die. He says that they are kept there until the final battle and the day of doom.
Which is his Ragnarok.
Yeah. Okay. Which he never really gets to, or he never really got to in his writings.
Yes. Wonder what that would have been like in his writings.
Yeah, that's like post Fourth Age stuff.
Wait, well, it may be even post our age.
Yeah.
If you consider it still,
If you consider Middle Earth and that whole history to be history of where we are.
Yes. Which is not, but interesting.
It's interesting to think about because one of the things you have to keep in mind is that Arda, the kingdom of Arda, as it was created by the Valar and Ilúvatar, is a flat plane.
Yes.
It's not round.
Yes. Until
Ilúvatar comes down and reshapes the earth this last
so
time.
when Valerian fell and was sunk in the oceans, that did not change the shape of the earth.
No.
The Arda was changed at this point of cataclysm.
Yes.
So what we're looking at, this is the ultimate cataclysm ever on the planet of Arda.
Right.
Ever. And I believe Valinor and Aman, all of that continent, all of the landmass was physically removed from the circles of the world, as they're called, right?
Yeah.
And the shape of the earth was made round.
Right.
Arda, the shape of Arda was remade.
It was
as a
remade.
circular
It was
planet.
remade round, and this was only discovered many years later when the Númenor survivors yearning just to see something because they believe that the Meneltarma still is above water.
Yes.
And if they just sail out far enough, they can find it. But they never do. But they do sail out far enough that they end up circumnavigating what is now globe.
Yes, indeed.
And so they also realize then that there's no way to get to Valinor because, as they say, the way they put it is all roads now are bent.
Yes. All roads now are bed. Now, the way this is represented in a very clear way, it's fascinating. Pick up a copy of Karen Wynne Fonstad's The Atlas of Middle Earth, and she manages to create some excellent cartography to explain these differences between the flat Earth and the round Earth. But in storytelling terms, mythologically speaking, I don't know of anything else in any other mythology that actually changes.
Well, most mythologies don't really deal with the idea of the Earth is flat, but it becomes round. Like I can't think of any mythology that does that.
And then a spiritual location, Valinor within it, literally becomes removed from this world.
Right.
So you have to achieve some kind of trans-dimensional travel.
And it's only very specific. It's only the Eldar, only the elves who can find that straight road that takes you off of the round Earth,
yes,
and up to where Valinor now is, which is, I believe he calls it the realm of hidden things.
The realm of hidden things.
Yeah.
Professor Tolkien, in his letters, actually had made the distinction between the seen and the unseen words. With a capital S for seen and capital U. The unseen is anything that's referred to in our time as beyond the veil of death, or beyond the veil of, the fourth dimension of time and space to another place, which we don't have the instruments yet to measure or to travel to.
Right.
But in Middle Earth, you didn't need any instruments. You just needed to be with the Eldar.
Right. Yeah. Because the Eldar could find the straight road, and they knew the path. Well, okay, they couldn't get to Valinor for a very long time.
Yes.
But we've already gone over all of that.
This is fascinating. You guys, this is one of the most interesting, really, and one of the juiciest parts of the Silmarillion.
It really is.
This combat stuff.
Because we sort of glossed over the details of the Cataclysm, and I don't know where I'll be showing this in the show tomorrow, or as you're watching it today. I'll be adding more detail, but there's a lot of detail in that final Cataclysm of the Earth opening up, swallowing the ships, the Numenor itself falling into the abyss. You have Tar Miriel, the Queen, desperately climbing the Menel Tarma, trying to save herself, but being overtaken.
Yes. Fascinating.
And then
of course, Sauron.
And then you've got Sauron.
And another point that we should talk about this ephemera, because...
And this was an interesting point you brought up.
People have questioned us for years about this. So I've been wondering about that. When we first began, the Green Books was a literary section of the website where we weren't necessarily talking about spy reports from New Zealand.
Right.
We were trying to talk about the ephemera and the juicy details of Tolkien's books that we loved so much.
And you get into interpretations, and that's where a lot of the discussions and arguments come into play.
One of the biggest challenges was for people to understand how could Sauron have carried his ring all the way back from a sunken island that was under the ocean waves, and all the way back to the lands of
Now, one of the things you have to bear in mind, in the text of the Silmarillion, the way he describes what happens to Sauron is, first of all, Sauron is laughing this entire time because all of his plans are coming to fruition. His plan this entire time has been to corrupt Numenor so completely that the Valar come in to wipe them out.
Yes.
So when he sees them, when Ar-Pharazôn and his fleet sail off to Valinor, he is laughing all of his plans are coming to fruition, and then something that even he wasn't expecting happens, which is that Ilúvatar intervenes instead of the Valar and opens up the earth and pulls Numenor down into the abyss, and Sauron goes down with it.
Yes, that's the point to not expect.
Right.
That's the point.
Sauron goes down with it, and the physical form that he has had this entire time evaporates, and he flies back to Middle Earth as a shadow.
A shadow only. A floating blob of protoplasm, maybe, and shadow.
Right.
And fans have asked us on the one we've done then, how is it possible for Sauron, as a bubbling spirit and nothing else, Even there's no hand, no finger to have a ring on.
Now,
How could you carry the
you have
ring
to
back?
remember, everything that has happened in Numenor happened after the creation of the Rings of Power and the One Ring.
Indeed.
And
The answer was addressed by Professor Tolkien himself.
And this I didn't know, because the implication that I got from the text was that Sauron left the ring behind, which is really not possible because he tied so much of himself into it.
Yes, indeed. We should also note.
Apparently, this is a long argument that has been going among Tolkien fans for decades. Whether or not Sauron took the ring with him to Numenor.
Here you go. Okay. This is
okay.
I think we're in the middle of
They're fighting a troll.
fighting. They have a cave troll.
They have a cave troll.
In the chamber of Mazarbul.
Yes.
This is the part in the film where if you were a newbie, you had never seen this film before, there's a reference to Balin, Nmenor, and you had seen the Hobbit films, you would know who Balin was,
Yeah.
and you'd be thinking of his character at that time.
Right.
See, that's why it's an interesting conversation about bringing newbies into the film. You start with Rings, you start with Hobbit.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because totally unrelated to anything Silmarillion, there are
Yes.
quite a few newbies in that theater right now. There are kids in there who have never seen The Lord of the Rings before. They're watching it for the first time
This is
right
very,
now.
very cool. Really cool experience. But in the Calabeth, it does not specifically mention One Ring, or at all. It does not specifically mention One Ring. But Professor Tolkien addressed this later on, because it had been suggested that Sauron had left his ring behind at the Tower of Barad-dûr in Mordor, after he, before he became a hostage of Eye of Sauron. But in his letters, however, Tolkien noted that Sauron, quote, naturally had the One Ring, and so very soon used it to dominate the minds and wills of most Númenorians.
Now
So
that's
the
interesting.
reason why the Númenorian chapter is so ugly and gets to be so evil and twisted is because of Sauron having his best Horcrux with him and using it to its fullest effect.
And
And
that
it
makes
makes
so much sense.
It's an example of what Sauron would have done to the rest of the Earth if he had gotten his ring back during the War of the Ring.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really want to know the outcome of if the Fellowship and Frodo had failed in their quest, and if the War of the Ring turned out very badly, and if the Dark Lord really did get his ring back, it would have been just as ugly and vicious and horrifying as what happened to the Númenorians.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate fate that Gandalf was trying to avoid.
Right.
And it's fascinating. But for Tolkien's explanation about the ring, he says, through the power of the ring, Sauron soon became an advisor of the king, and he used his influence to undermine the religion of Nmenor, which we have discussed. Okay? And he also says, right down here at the very bottom, Tolkien wrote that Sauron, quote unquote, took up, those are the two words he uses, took up his ring in spirit form and returned to Middle Earth floating across the waves.
Actually, it says took up this ring after his spirit returned to Middle Earth.
Tolkien wrote that Sauron took up the ring after his spirit returned to Middle Earth.
And that's sort of where I think the argument lies in.
There it is.
Because what is implied in that
Yes.
is that he left the ring behind.
Okay, and he also says that in what letter? In published letter number 211. In letter number 211, Tolkien says, I do not think that one need to boggle at the spirit of Sauron carrying off the One Ring, upon which his power of dominating minds now largely depended. So Professor Tolkien tried to reassure people that they shouldn't be so confused by this concept, but over many generations, people were.
There was confusion. There's been a lot of arguments about it, and
Yes.
I'm sure I will get comments on the YouTube archive of this explaining how we're wrong.
That's okay. We know what Professor Tolkien said, and that's the final word.
Yeah.
It is really interesting to me that Sauron gets away with it.
Yeah.
If he had met his end, we wouldn't have had a Lord of the Rings story.
Right.
And that is also indicates what was going on in Tolkien's mind when he had published the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And it was so wonderfully successful.
Yes.
And he was going back and revising his drafts.
That's the
So moving.
I brought that up before, like how The Hobbit was never a part of this when he initially wrote it.
Yes.
It was a standalone children's story. It was published as a standalone children's story.
That's right.
And it was only when he was writing The Lord of the Rings. And The Lord of the Rings initially was going to be a sequel to The Hobbit and not part of this greater Middle-earth story. But he started tying stuff in with it. And he's like, because Middle-earth had been such a part of his life for so long, it was impossible for him to not tie stuff into it. And so he began to rewrite parts of Lord of the Rings to tie in with Middle-earth history.
Yes.
And
Do you know
then,
Professor Tolkien admitted to his publisher? He said, quote unquote, I've created a monster.
Yep.
He said that.
Yep.
And that's the reason why we admire his craft as an author, because his world building is so watertight.
And that's why.
Everything fits together.
And you see, that's why I don't really consider the term retconning to be a very negative thing, because The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and Silmarillion, as we know them today, are all the result of Tolkien retconning his own work
Over and over again.
over and over and
Even
over.
the second edition of The Hobbit, he retconned the Riddle game in a big way to make it fit with.
Right. Yeah. He rewrote a lot of us. He rewrote many parts of The Hobbit to put more emphasis on the ring, so that it was significant enough that when you get to The Lord of the Rings, you know what the hell it is.
Exactly. Fascinating. Fascinating. The more you learn about the Silmarillion, which is something that most readers, casual readers of Tolkien, cannot get into it. Or they try, but they fail. But you guys, it's so rewarding.
It really is. It really is.
Everything's in there.
Like everything you want to know, because the Silmarillion goes all the way up to and including The Lord of the Rings. Like it ends at the Grey Havens the same way The Lord of the Rings does. So, so it gives you this much wider context for everything that you know about The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And like I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, because we're going to start to get into the last chapter.
That's for another episode. Yes.
But I found a lot of the stuff with Dol Guldur very interesting.
Me too.
In the final chapter, and especially with how it's portrayed in the Hobbit movies. And like part of me is sort of like shaking my head, like, oh god, Peter Jackson. And then another part of me is like, okay, but you can't have an entire movie of Gandalf going to Dol Guldur and then going away, and then going back to Dol Guldur, and then going away, and then going back to Dol Guldur, and going back several times until finally he realized, oh wait, Sauron's here.
Yeah, you can't do it that way.
Yeah.
Well, it ends up being like a little bit of a video game set piece where they fight with the Nazgul.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. But when you guys are reading The Lord of the Rings, take a cursory glance again at Appendix A, and you'll see a diluted form of the Akalabeth there, and you can get what you'd call a quick primer, on the story of the Numenorians, and then after you go from those few pages, just jump right into the Akalabeth and read all juicy details, and you'll see what a difference many years of thinking and scholarly work make as Tolkien fleshed out this amazing story. And again, full credit to Christopher editing the damn thing, putting it together.
Yeah, like I don't think people give Christopher Tolkien enough credit for the sheer amount of work he had to do to distill the Silmarillion into what we have.
Yes.
Because Tolkien had been working on it, but he never finished it.
Yes.
And there were lots of various odds and ends. And Demosthenes and I talked about this on a previous episode, where he actually had to rewrite a lot of the chapter of the Ruin of Doriath, because a lot of what had been in that initially didn't jive with everything else that he had written.
Yes, exactly.
And
so it may also be said that Professor Tolkien caught himself up a little bit in the scheme of his own loom.
Yeah.
You know, he was looming together so many threads, and so many place names,
really,
and histories, and so many distinct genealogies of elves, men, and dwarves. And he may have inadvertently tripped himself up a few times by the sheer scope of his invention. And the fact that Christopher managed to pull any of it together in publishable form is a minor miracle for us.
It is great. It's really astounding.
It is.
And like so yeah, we got one more episode.
One more episode. I'm so glad to be able to spend some time.
I'm so glad you're able to do this, because I know like you have been talking for a while about wanting to come on and talk about Numenor specifically.
Yes, it is. Well, it's always fascinated me that Professor Tolkien put such an effort, a real specific effort into making his mythology a mythology for England, because in the linguistic roots of his exercise, he felt that the Arthurian legends were too French and were not appropriate for England. He really thought that Saxon stuff is,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
he really did not
Now
want
we did
England to
we did read
exist in that mythology.
we did read the one published work that Tolkien has of the Arthurian legend, The Fall of Arthur.
Yes.
And he never finished it, so it ends very abruptly.
Yeah, that's true. And it may have been because his tastes changed so much.
Maybe.
I mean,
Yeah.
when Professor Tolkien said, I had originally a high-minded concept, and maybe it was foolish, and he makes a little self-deprecating remark saying, maybe it was way too overreaching, but I had originally thought that I could weave all these tales together to be a grand mythology for my homeland, for England, because he felt England never had one of its own.
Right.
And he thought that King Arthur was a poor substitute, and that it was too French, like I said, in its origin.
Well, yeah. So King Arthur is very French.
And by the time you get to these complicated, this big cosmology, and the creation of Arda, and the spirits, the beings, the men and the elves and the dwarves, when you put it all together, it is an amazing piece of world building.
I don't know if we're getting drowned out right now because Gandalf's fighting a Balrog.
Gandalf is fighting a Balrog, but I don't know what the sound quality is like. But let me tell you, Professor Tolkien has accomplished what nobody else in the 20th century canon of writers ever could. He has a completeness to his world building, and it is the most impressive of any author. Period.
That's the thing that I find so fascinating about the Silmarillion is just how complete a mythology it is. Like it has a set beginning, it has a set ending, and all these wonderful tales in between, and they all tie together and into this like truly epic narrative. Like,
very, very. Very impressive. And I have to say, I commend you. My hat is off to you, Josh. My hat is off to you, Josh, for this effort that you've made with the Torn Book Club, guiding readers through this rather complex piece of text.
This was not my intention originally. I was running out of ideas for the show, so I'm like, okay, I need to come up with something. And I know I talked about doing the Silmarillion at some point, so I'm like, okay, screw it, I'm just going to do it. And so, like, a lot of this has been me sort of figuring out how to do this as we go along. So, like, the first few episodes where we're talking about
that one.
that one. We had Suvi on for that one,
That's lovely.
and she was fantastic.
Very good.
And then later on with the Valaquenta, I had Suzanne, the Button Lady. She came on, and she had all these dolls to illustrate all the different Valar.
Oh, fantastic!
And it's hilarious. So like. It's been a very weird, bizarre journey through Middle Earth, and I know this is the penultimate episode. We still got one more to go after this, but like, it really is like starting to look back on like, God, I really read the crap out of this book.
You did. To your credit. To your credit. It's an amazing journey. I know that in layman's terms, people have their own, levels of difficulty in absorbing the Silmarillion, but it is so worth it.
I know that a number of our viewers have been telling me about how this show has helped them to sort of get through the Silmarillion themselves. I think I Stole the One Ring has told me on many occasions that this has really helped her to understand the Silmarillion.
Yeah, she's awesome, by the way. Yeah, we have fans who join us at our live shows. So you enjoy Torn Book Club on Sundays, and I'll host with Justin on Torn Tuesdays, and together.
And another day I will get over to Torn Tuesday. It's not as easy for me now as it used to be.
Justin wants to get started on Unfinished Tales.
Oh, I plan to do Unfinished Tales.
Okay, then I don't have to.
Yeah.
But that means I can join you perhaps on Sunday.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll have to do some pre-recorded sessions.
Yes.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Excellent.
All right. Well, thank you, Cliff, so much.
Friend.
I really appreciate it.
My hobbity friend. My good hobbity friend. Geeks for life.
Yes.
Geeks for life. Metal geeks for life.
Exactly.
I'm just joking. All right.
All right. Okay.
You guys enjoy the rest of the show, and you're in good hands.
Thanks.
With Josh. We'll talk to you later. See you soon.
Okay, so that was my conversation with Cliff, and we're back live now. Yes, I stole the One Ring. We were talking about you at the end. What is Temple saying here? I think these shows are good because it's not so academic that it would go over the average person's head. Tolkien could easily get a little too heady for many people. Well, I appreciate you saying that, Temple, because this is really just me figuring it out as I go along. And I hope... I can't tell on your end how I'm sounding right now, but it looks like it seems to me like the levels are peaking. So let me know if I'm not sounding correct or right, audio quality wise. Also, I apologize for the audio quality of the recording. It was something we just thought to do pretty much spur of the moment. I had brought my laptop with me to work on putting together the illustrations for today's show. And let me go back here. And so I didn't really have a whole lot of my equipment with me other than my laptop, so we just used the laptop camera, which I had never used before, so I wasn't really sure how good it would sound or not. So now I know. So when we record again next weekend at the Baggins birthday picnic, I'll bring better recording equipment with me, so we won't sound quite as tinny as we did in that. But some of the finer points that Cliff and I were talking about in this section of the Akala Beth, the fall of Numenor, really kind of speaks to just like how epic this whole section is. And Cliff brought up an interesting point that I was not aware of about apparently the controversy over whether or not Sauron had the ring with him when he was in Numenor. And one of the things we were talking about was, now that I have the book in front of me, I can find the actual line. He says that Tolkien just has one line in here. It's after the destruction, after Sauron has lost his physical form. He goes back to Middle-earth, and the line in the book says that he took up his ring after returning to Mordor. And so I took that to mean that Sauron had left the ring behind. Tolkien, however, addressed this later in a letter saying that that was in fact not the case, and he did bring the One Ring with him when he was taken prisoner in Numenor, and that's how he was able to sway the Númenorians as completely as he did. Now, we kind of glossed over some of the finer points of what exactly happened with Sauron when he was imprisoned. And it began very slowly and very deliberately, and Sauron was put in a prison cell, but he's a very smooth talker, and he was able to catch the ear of Ar-Pharazôn through flattery, calling him things like the King of Kings, the greatest king of Numenor, the mightiest of men, stuff like that. And Ar-Pharazôn, of course, started listening to him, and he begins to place these ideas in his head of how he's been lied to by the Valar. Now, let me see if I can find the actual quote, because he actually has a line where he explains all of this, and it's kind of... It's pretty fascinating, and it's pretty to see him talk about it like this. Where the heck is this scene? Here we go. Okay. So this is how Sauron begins sort of turning Ar-Pharazôn by playing to his greed, playing to his own ego, and telling him about all the wealth that he can get, because he tells him that not only is there all the wealth in Middle Earth that is Ar-Pharazôn's for the taking, there are also other lands in the earth that haven't been explored that are full of riches that he can have. And if he goes even further, he can go out into the infinite darkness, and if he pays tribute to the Lord of that darkness, then he will create infinite worlds for Ar-Pharazôn to have even more wealth, and he will have infinite wealth. So the way he describes the darkness is like this: "And out of it the world was made, for darkness alone is worshipful, and the Lord thereof may yet make other worlds to be gifts to those that serve him, so that the increase of their power shall find no end." And then Ar-Pharazôn, of course, asks, well, who is the Lord of Darkness? And this is when Sauron drops the bomb. He says, "It is he whose name is not now spoken, for the Valar have deceived you concerning him, putting forward the name of Eru, a phantom devised in the folly of their hearts, seeking to enchain men in servitude to themselves. For they are the oracle of this Eru, which speaks only what they will. But he that is their master shall yet prevail, and he will deliver you from this phantom, and his name is Melkor, Lord of all, giver of freedom, and he shall make you stronger than they." So with that, he's planting the seed of converting Ar-Pharazôn to worshiping Melkor, to worshiping Morgoth. And he falls into, he convinces all of his counselors to go in with him, all except for one guy. And that one guy is, where is he? Here he is. Amandil. And Amandil is the leader of the Elf Friends, the people who have been loyal to the Elves and the Valar all this time, and they're called the Faithful. Like Eravandi saying, "Melkor, giver of freedom." That's exactly true. But and that would be the reaction that Amandil gave, because he's not buying any of this. And he also knows that as Ar-Pharazôn and his counselors start falling more and more for this, they will eventually destroy themselves. And so he begins by speaking out, but not too severely, so he's never really criticized. He's just sort of pushed off to the side, because Ar-Pharazôn has a lot of respect for him because he was a great captain in his military. The Temple saying, "I kind of want to call him Almond Meal." That's funny. So, but Amandil still knows that things are about to turn very ugly here. So he begins consolidating the faithful and bringing them together. And meanwhile, Sauron is gaining more and more power and eventually becomes a high priest in Númenor. And he's led out and he builds this huge temple to the worship of Melkor. And we talked about this a little bit, or Cliff and I talked about this with the destruction of the tree Nimloth. Sauron tells Alfarazon that one of the best tributes that he can make to Melkor is to chop down Nimloth and burn it to him as a sacrifice. And Alfarazon doesn't really want to do this because he believes in the prophecy that the fate of Numenor is tied to the fate of Nimloth. So he resists this, but Amandil knows that he's eventually going to break. And so he's very worried about this, and he relates this story to his son, Elendil, who you probably know from The Lord of the Rings. And Elendil's two sons, Isildur and Anarion, characters who I'm sure you know. So this is them in the early days of their lives when they were still in Numenor. And Isildur takes it upon himself to infiltrate the holding area where they have Nimloth, which is under heavy guard, and to steal a fruit from it. And he does this. It's a very brave thing that he does, because he sneaks in by himself in disguise, steals a fruit from Nimloth, and he's able to escape, but not without being grievously wounded. And so he gives the fruit to his grandfather, Amandil, and then falls into a coma. And so with that, Amandil plants the seed from the fruit, and it sprouts into a seedling. And once the seedling appears, Isildur is miraculously healed. Light of the King is asking, why does Isildur have the branch in his hand? Is that symbolic? It probably is, because he's the one who saved the tree of Nimloth. Because after that is done, Alfarazon finally caves and does chop down Nimloth. And so when he chops it down, he then offers it to Sauron as a sacrifice to Melkor, and Melkor creates a huge pyre out of Nimloth, and then begins a very quick descent with Numenor. Everybody becomes much darker in their minds. They become more violent to each other. They go back to Middle Earth. Now they're no longer bringing the people of Middle Earth gifts. They're no longer asking for tribute. Now they are taking slaves, and they are demanding everything from them. And so they become huge tyrants in Middle Earth. And a lot of the slaves they bring back are put up as human sacrifices to Melkor. And even more than that, they begin to create false accusations against the faithful in order to imprison them, and then sacrifice them also to Melkor. So we've got human sacrifice happening. We've got violence in the streets. We've got all sorts of debauchery and all sorts of horrible things going on, and Numenor has very much descended into darkness. And Suzanne is making the point of comparing it to Sodom and Gomorrah, and very much it is that way, and it goes down pretty much the same way, because this whole time Amandil has devised a plan where he's going to deliberately break the ban on Numenor, which is that nobody from Numenor can set foot in Valinor. Nobody from Numenor is allowed to go to Valinor. He is going to deliberately break that ban, go to Valinor, and much like Arendil, basically plead his case with the Valar to try to stop what he knows is coming, and to take pity on those who have remained faithful. And he tells his son Elendil. Suzanne is saying, or even attempt to sail to Valinor. Yes, exactly. He tells his son Elendil to slowly start gathering all the members of the faithful and start putting them on ships. So we sort of have a bit of a Noah's Ark scenario going on. Take only what you need to survive, take those who have been faithful this whole time, put them on these ships, and be ready for whatever is going to happen. Because at this point, Amandil doesn't know. He doesn't know what he can do. All he knows is that he has to try. And he says that he'll accept the punishment of breaking the ban if it means that he can save Numenor and his people. And so that's the last we see of Amandil. Yes, Suzanne is saying he said he didn't think he needed to warn Manwë, but he wanted to plead the case for the rest of the faithful. Exactly, and that was his main point here, was that he wanted to plead his case, even though he knew that it wasn't very likely that they would show mercy a second time like they did with Arendil. That's there we go. But he has to try. So Elendil loads up the ships. They begin to they begin to get ready for whatever is going to happen. But we never hear from Amandil again. But Elendil, Isildur, and Anarion work very hard and very deliberately so as not to raise suspicion. They begin to load up these ships, and they load them up again with lots of things, but two things very specifically. They load them up with the seedling that was taken from the seed that Isildur took from Nimloth, and they also take with them. Where is it? Here it is. They also take with them the seeing stones of the Palantiri, which were gifts from the elves. And it should also be noted that these ships of the faithful, as they're called, where is it? Here we are. The ships of the faithful, there are 9 of them. Much in the same way that there were 9 rings for men. There are 9 rings. There were 9 members of the Nazgul, 9 members of the Fellowship. Now, so we sort of see this balance of 9, where like we have the 9 Nazgul that are countered by the 9 members of the Fellowship, and here we have the nine ships of the faithful to counter the 9 rings, which at this point haven't been given specifically to men yet. But I still found it interesting that again with men we have the repeat of the number 9. So read into that what you will. So what begins at first is the Valar do begin to assault Numenor, first with these giant clouds in the shape of eagles that change the entire landscape of Numenor. They begin to basically attack with lightning all over. They capsize ships. The first time a Númenorian ship has been capsized since the beginning of Númenor. The lightning starts killing people in the streets. It smashes open the temple that Sauron has built. And yet they still press on. Ar-Pharazôn still arms his people and makes ready his gigantic fleet of warships to assault Valinor. And eventually they do go. And they get so far as Ar-Pharazôn and I believe like a rather sizable contingent of his troops actually do make it all the way to Valinor and actually set foot in Valinor. And they actually begin to surround the city of Tirion. And it's at this point that the Valar actually relinquish their governorship of Arda, and they relinquish it to Eru, to Iluvatar, and basically say to him, do with them what you will. Where is it? Yeah. Then Manwë upon the mountain called upon Iluvatar, and for that time the Valar laid down their government of Arda. But Iluvatar showed forth his power, and he changed the fashion of the world. Light of the King is saying the number 9 is a reference to finality in Hebrew. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. So the Valar relinquished their governorship of Arda to Iluvatar, at which point Iluvatar basically opens up the earth. He creates a huge chasm in the oceans that swallows up the fleet. And Ar-Pharazôn and his people who have actually made landfall in Valinor, they're buried under a huge landslide. And the chasm is so huge, and it shakes the world so badly that it also pulls Númenor, the entire island, down under the ocean. And so we have this huge destruction, very much like the destruction of Atlantis. The entire island of Númenor falls underwater, and Eru actually creates a huge wave that he sends coursing over Númenor all the way to Middle Earth, and it completely wipes out Númenor. And there's a little bit of a poignant moment where Tar-Miriel, who is the queen, who was actually one of the faithful, because her father was Tar Palantir, the one who made the prophecy and tried to restore relations with Valinor. But she was one of the faithful, but she stayed behind, and she tried to climb the huge peak of the Meneltarma, which has the temple to Eru up at the top, in order to save herself or to prove her faith to Eru and be spared. But she doesn't make it, and she's overtaken by the wave. And then we have the ships of the faithful, who are taken up by a giant wind and the giant wave. They're not pulled under. They're actually shoved. They're actually pushed by the wave and the wind all the way to Middle Earth. And the wave itself is so huge that it actually buries it actually drowns a good section of Middle Earth underwater, and most of that is the area that we've known for so long to be called Beleriand, which all the events of the First Age happened in. And so they land there. They don't. It seems to them that Amundil was able to get through to Manwë because it seems as though the ships of the faithful were very specifically spared in this destruction. And from there, they begin to establish their new kingdoms, specifically the two kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. Again, probably know that one. And that's when we start getting into the final chapter, which is of the Third Age and the Rings of Power. But I want to read this last section of the Akalabeth, because it's sort of it gives a very interesting insight into how the Númenorians lived and survived afterwards, after the destruction of Numenor. And it is kind of tragic. Among the exiles, many believe that the summit of the Meneltarma, the pillar of heaven, was not drowned forever, but rose again above the waves, a lonely island lost in the great rivers. For it had been a hallowed place, and even in the days of Sauron none had defiled it. And some there were of the seed of Arundel that afterwards sought for it, because it was said among lore-masters that the far-sighted men of old could see from the Meneltarma a glimmer of the deathless land. For even after the ruin, the hearts of the Dunedain were still set westwards. And though they knew indeed that the world was changed, they said, Avalone is vanished from the earth, and the land of Aman is taken away, but the world of this present darkness they cannot be found. And in the world of this present darkness they cannot be found. Yet once they were, and therefore they still are, in true being, and in the whole shape of the world as it first was devised. For the Dunedain held that even mortal men, if so blessed, might look upon other times than those of their body's life, and they longed ever to escape from the shadows of their exile and see in some fashion the light that dies not. For the sorrow of the thought of death had pursued them over the deeps of the sea. Thus it was the great mariners among them would still search the empty seas, hoping to come upon the Isle of Meneltarma, there to see a vision of things that were, but they found it not. And those that sailed far came only to the new lands, and found them like the old lands and subject to death. And those that sailed furthest set but a girdle around the earth, and returned weary at last to the place of their beginning. And they said, all roads are now bent. Thus in after days, what by the voyages of ships, what by lore and starcraft, the kings of men knew that the world was indeed made round. And yet the Eldar were permitted still to depart, and to come to the ancient west to Avalone as if they would. Therefore the lore masters of men said that a straight road must still be, for those that were permitted to find it. And they taught that while the new world fell away, the old road and the path of the memory of the west still went on. And it was, as it were, a mighty bridge invisible, that passed through the air of breath and of flight, which were bent now as the world was bent, and traversed Ilmen, which flesh unaided cannot endure, until it came to Tol Eressëa, the lonely isle. and maybe even beyond to Valinor, where the Valar still dwell and watch the unfolding of the story of the world. Tales and rumors arose along the shores of the sea concerning mariners and men forlorn upon the water who, by some fate or grace or favor of the Valar, had entered in upon the straight way, and seen the face of the world sink below them, and so had come to the lamplit quays of Avalone, or verily unto the last breaches of the margin of Aman, and there they looked upon the white mountain, dreadful and beautiful, before they died. So that's the fate of Numenor and the fate of the Númenorians. And Suzanne is saying, like a rainbow bridge? Not unlike it, actually. Like, I actually thought the same thing when I heard about it. But this gives you a little bit more of an explanation as to where they go when they leave the Grey Havens. So it's basically a straight road that launches you out into the sky and up into Valinor, and he says specifically where the Valar watch the unfolding of the world. So they are no longer taking an active part in the history of the world. Now, it could be argued that they're influencing some things with the ring, and of course they do send Maiar to Middle Earth later on in the form of the Istari, or the wizards, but we'll get into that in our next episode. But for the most part, they've pretty much relinquished their authority over the world. And so they're more spectators, but they still welcome the elves back whenever they want to go. So it is Lady the King saying here, saying that this bridge takes them back to Valinor after they sail to the Grey Havens. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. After they sail off from the Grey Havens, they go on this, what they call the Straight Road, which is one that doesn't circumnavigate over the globe, but instead rises up above it. Yeah, and that was Suzanne is saying, Mar nu Falmar that was whelmed in the waves, Akalabeth the downfallen, Atalante in the Eldarin tongue. And so yes, and I mentioned that in the conversation with Cliff, that the sunken Numenor island is called Atalante, which is not too far removed from the name Atlantis. So I don't believe that was an accident. The same way the elf city in Tol Eressëa is called Avalone, kind of like the island of Avalon from Arthurian legend. So we do see shades of that throughout this, but I would say of all the stories that Tolkien wrote, and specifically those in the Silmarillion, the Akalabeth is probably the one that feels the most biblical to me. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but to me it really feels like there's a very strong sense of faith in this one, like with the elf friends who eventually call themselves the Faithful, and their appeal for mercy and for some kind of to be saved from what is going to be a biblical retribution. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was, and we talked about this a little bit with Cliff, was that after all this is done, Sauron was on Numenor when it sank underneath into the ocean, and he fell down into the abyss. But he didn't die. He lost his physical form and then came back to Middle-earth as a shadow. And he was never able after that to assume a physical form the way he had before. He was never able to assume a physical form the way he had before, but he ends up going back to Mordor and then working very hard on crafting a form for himself, which is going to take a while because he's just become a vague shadow at this point. But eventually he does craft a new form for himself, which we all know as the Eye of Sauron, the lidless eye. And that's going to be his primary symbol from here on out. So we have this huge cataclysm, and I believe, I sort of made this mistake for a while where I thought that the destruction of Numenor signified the end of the Second Age, but it's not. The Second Age still goes on for quite some time. It actually ends with the Battle of the Last Alliance. So yeah, now Suzanne and Eravani and everybody are talking about the various biblical type references that we see in the Akalabeth. And like I said, I feel like this one is probably the most biblical of all of the stories in the Silmarillion. And it's also the most catastrophic and the most devastating. I don't think Tolkien ever wrote anything that encompassed so much destruction as the Akalabeth does. But yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of this story and the end of this episode. Because where are we now? We're at about an hour and a half, give or take ish, maybe a bit more. So I want to thank Cliff again for talking with me yesterday, and again I apologize for the audio quality of that recording. The next time we record something, it will be better. Suzanne is saying the last alliance of elves and men, which according to the movies ends up being the second to the last alliance of elves and men. Yes. But since we're going off of the books here, we're just going to call it the last alliance and not the second to last alliance, because that just sounds silly. But all of that is for the next episode, which is the last Silmarillion episode. And that's going to cover the final chapter, which is called Of the Rings of Power and the Third Age. Now this chapter is actually going to go all the way up to the Grey Havens at the end of the Return of the King. So we're actually going to have some overlap with the Lord of the Rings. But I think what you'll find is that I think what you'll find in this chapter is that the perspective that is used in retelling the story of the Lord of the Rings is a rather unique one. Suzanne is saying she'll be there at the picnic with two of her students who I may be convinced to join us. That would be cool. So yeah, we're going to be dark next week, because next Sunday is our annual Baggins birthday picnic, which we have in Griffith Park every year around this time. Usually the closest weekend to the 22nd, which is Bilbo and Frodo's actual birthday. So this year it falls on Sunday the 20th. So we won't have a live episode next week. We'll be recording some conversations for at least part of the party. I'm going to try to set up a group discussion, depending on how many people we can get into it, to talk about this. And then we'll talk more about it live on the 27th, which will be our final big finale for the Silmarillion. And Suzanne is saying, poor Josh has to get there at like 9 a.m. to stake out a spot. Yes, that's what I do every year. So yeah, that'll bring us to the end of this. I want to thank everybody for being part of this discussion today. And yeah, next week we'll be at the party, and then the week after, the 27th, will be the end of all things, or at least the end of the Silmarillion. So thank you, Eruvandi. I Stole the One Ring, Light of the Kings, Suzanne. I saw Ava was in here for a while. Temple is here too. Who else do we have here? Yeah, that's it. I saw a couple people go in and out. I saw Ava was here for a little bit and then left. But thank you for coming. Thank you for Cliff for the lively discussion from yesterday. And yeah, thank you all. And I will see you all in 2 weeks or next week if you're at the picnic. And Suzanne is saying, I'm glad you'll be here with me at the end of all things. Funny. So I will see you all next week, and never stop reading.